Clash Royale is no stranger to many different strategies and ways of playing the game. That being said, there are some things in the game that you really just shouldn't be doing. So here are more things in Clash Royale that you just might be doing wrong. The first mistake you might be making is not splitting your archers. The archers are a strong 3 elixir card that I personally enjoy using, especially when they're evolved, but they are often way too easy to counter with arrows or even log depending on the situation if you play them both on the same side. Instead, you can either place the archers in the very back middle of the arena to split them, or if you're already building up a push from the back on one side or both, feel free to split them closer to the bridge, which will force your opponent to counter both sides since the lone archer will get some damage if left unanswered. This strategy will allow you to avoid getting easily countered and it'll force your opponent to spend more elixir to defend your pushes. The next mistake is simply using the minion horde. Now don't get me wrong, I have nothing against minions and I actually think they're a strong card both on defense and offense. In fact, the minion horde does give you more minions for a cheaper cost per minion than a regular minions card. That extra value does come at a cost though, as your opponent can simply use the arrows or even fireball on your minion horde to take it out for a positive elixir trade. This is different from the regular minions where using arrows against them would be an even trade and using fireball against them would be a negative trade for your opponent. If you do decide to throw the horde into your deck, I'd recommend taking a page out of the last tips playbook and splitting them in the back to get more value and put pressure on both lanes. The next mistake is playing your win condition into obvious counters. If you just saw your opponent play their building, mini P.E.K.K.A, or tornado, that's information you should be using. A lot of players just mindlessly send in something like a hog rider, royal hogs, or balloon, even though the counter they hate the most is clearly available. Waiting just a few seconds or forcing that counter out first can make the difference between no damage and taking an entire tower. Another big mistake is stacking support troops directly behind your tower. Placing troops like the musketeer, wizard, or executioner right behind your princess tower makes it extremely easy for your opponent to get spell value. Instead, you should offset these troops slightly or place them in the back corners to avoid giving your opponent such an easy time getting a lot of value. And on the flip side, when your opponent does this, make sure to punish them for a good trade that will help you get ahead. Next up is not protecting your ranged troops properly. A lot of players drop a musketeer or archer and expect it to survive on its own, but cards like the miner, royal delivery, or fireball are everywhere and can easily take them out. You should be ready to protect key ranged troops with skeletons, an ice spirit, or a knight if needed, especially if they're critical to your defense. Another mistake is cycling spells for no real reason. Sometimes in Clash Royale you have to just burn a card to get to the card you really need, but using the log, zap, or arrows to just do something often leaves you vulnerable when you actually need them. If your opponent knows your small spell is out of cycle, they can immediately punish you with a goblin barrel, wall breakers, or swarm cards, putting you at a huge disadvantage. So instead, I'd recommend getting creative by using less optimal cards to defend and figuring out how to prevent as much damage as possible. Then even if you take a bit of damage, you'll probably be in a better spot to set up a push soon after. One mistake I've seen a lot recently with the addition of heroes is forcing them into your deck just to use up the slots. Right now, there are limited hero options in the game, and it can be tempting to make a really random deck with no synergy just to fit in the new hero card, but oftentimes a deck with more synergy can get you more wins even if you aren't utilizing all your hero slots. And if you really want to use the new hero, just use them in a deck where either that card already shines or where their special ability synergizes really well with the other cards. The next mistake I see players make all the time recently is using their hero knight's ability when he's at very low health. His ability does give him a small shield while causing everything to target him, but if he's already at a true sliver of health, he'll die quickly anyway and won't get much value. Instead, try using his ability when he's at about 30% health or more to ensure he doesn't just go down in 2 seconds. Next is using spells reactively instead of predictively. Reactive spells are fine, they have a place in the game and most of the time they'll get the job done, but predictive spells are what wins you games. Predicting a goblin barrel, skeleton army, or defensive troop placement can give you massive elixir advantages and swing momentum in your favor, especially at higher levels of play. So pay attention to your opponent's cycle and how they counter your pushes. Then after the first minute or two of the match, you should be able to make a solid prediction or two and take a tower without too much trouble. Another mistake is letting your opponent control the pace of the match. If you're constantly reacting instead of forcing responses, you're letting your opponent dictate the game, even if you get a bit of chip damage on them here and there and think you bested them. Even defensive decks need moments of pressure. A simple counter push or opposite lane play can stop your opponent from building unstoppable pushes by forcing them to spread their resources too thin. Take control by defending smartly and then going all in when you know they don't have a good counter in hand. Next up is not adjusting your playstyle in overtime. A lot of players play the exact same way in single elixir as they do in overtime, which is a huge mistake. In fact, some decks are literally built to just survive the first 2 minutes of the match and then overwhelm you in double and triple elixir. Overtime favors faster cycles, more aggressive pressure, and smarter spell usage, so if you don't adapt, you'll slowly fall behind even in a close match. The next mistake is switching decks all the time. I swear some players just switch up their deck every time they lose a game or see a new deck that is trending on Reddit or something. This is already a bad idea since you won't be getting much better with any one deck and your overall skill will remain pretty low, but it's even worse if you don't have all your cards maxed out. This is because sticking to one deck allows you to upgrade that deck over time as you climb ladder and improve at the deck, then you can use those those rewards to upgrade and learn another deck or two and work on upgrading those cards. Next is ignoring tower health thresholds. Knowing when a tower is within spell cycle range is crucial. If your opponent's tower is within fireball range, for example, it doesn't make sense to do much defending or try to build a push when you can just end the game instantly. This seems obvious, but I've seen people have, for example, arrows and a log in hand, which would be enough to win the game, but instead they'll instinctively just defend my push for some reason and let me clutch out a win. Also, pro tip, if you hold your finger on any card, including spells, it'll show you their damage, which can be super helpful across different game modes where your card levels may or may not be capped. Another mistake is using your champion or hero ability at the wrong time. These abilities are strongest when they change interactions, not when they're just used anytime your opponent places anything to defend the champion or hero. Waiting just half a second longer with abilities like the Golden Knight Dash or Skeleton King ability can completely flip a fight in your favor instead of being wasted. While we're on the subject of abilities, another huge mistake is using the ability every time you play the champion or hero. These abilities were meant to be strategic additions to the game that can be used when you stand to get a lot of value, but there is a reason they don't go off automatically. That's because sometimes there won't be a good opportunity to use the ability and you'll just want to let the champion play out on its own. Having the restraint to avoid spamming the ability button anytime you can is what separates amateur players from great ones. One of the biggest mistakes players make is focusing only on the current interaction instead of what their next few cards will be. Every card you play pushes you closer to a new hand, and if you don't plan ahead, you can easily end up with your win condition or key defensive card out of cycle at the worst possible time. Good players will intentionally hold or cycle specific cards so that when their opponent attacks, they already know what they're going to have in hand and what they won't. If you ever feel like you never have the right card when you need it, chances are you're cycling without a plan. And finally, the last mistake is tilting after one bad interaction. One missed spell or bad placement doesn't lose the game, but panicking afterward often can. Staying calm, slowing the game down, and resetting mentally is one of the most underrated skills in Clash Royale and will win you more games than almost any mechanical trick. Don't let your opponent get in your head with emotes and other toxic habits, and you just might clutch out that win. The next mistake I see people make all the time is ignoring the pushing mechanic in Clash Royale. If you don't already know, you can actually push slower troops like the P.E.K.K.A. to get them to the tower much faster by simply placing them at the bridge and then placing a faster card like a Hog Rider or some goblins behind them. You need to line this up correctly though, since if you put the Hog Rider off to the side even just one tile, he'll most likely just push past the P.E.K.K.A. and go to the tower on his own, most likely leaving your push ineffective. So especially if you already use the Hog Rider, goblins, or another fast moving ground troop in your deck, I'd recommend giving this strategy a try since you might just catch your opponent off guard and get an easy win. This next tip is simply sleeping on the skeletons. The skeletons are an amazing and versatile card that can fit into pretty much any deck archetype. Not only are they cheap at only 1 elixir, so they can help you cycle to your evolutions or win condition faster, but they can actually fully counter a lot of cards in the game, such as the mini P.E.K.K.A. along with several others. Any deck can benefit from using the skeletons since they can provide so much value for such a cheap price. Those of you who've played the game for a while might remember that the skeletons card actually used to contain 4 skeletons instead of 3, but this was way too overpowered, so Supercell nerfed them down to 3. But the card still remains very powerful to this day. So if you haven't given the skeletons a try yet, or if it's been a while since you've used them, go ahead and throw them in your deck and see what happens. The next mistake on our list is not going for King Tower activations. For those who don't know, your King Tower is activated when one of two things happens. Either one of your Princess Towers gets destroyed, or the King Tower takes damage in any way, whether it be by a troop or a spell. You can actually use this mechanic to your advantage to activate your own King Tower and make it harder for your opponent to break through since you have an extra cannon on defense. While there are some advanced strategies out there for activating your King Tower, I'm going to show you 3 simple ways you can do this in your next Clash Royale match. In the first scenario, we see an Electro Spirit coming towards your Princess Tower alone. As you know, the Electro Spirit will survive if it has full health and will be able to jump onto the Arena Tower. We can actually use the chain mechanic of the E-Spirit to our advantage here, as if we place a card right between our King Tower and our Princess Tower at the right time, the attack will chain onto our King Tower, activating it and making the match much harder for our opponent to win. In the second scenario, we see a lone Firecracker coming across the bridge towards our tower. This one's even easier, as all we have to do is place virtually any card on this tile, and the Firecracker's backsplash damage will activate our King Tower while saving our Princess Tower from damage at the same time. The last scenario is a great one to try out if you haven't already, and it's simply using the Fisherman to activate the King Tower. As you know, the Fisherman can pull cards towards him with his fishing hook, so if you have an incoming Hog Rider, Giant, or virtually any other high HP card, you can simply place your Fisherman around here and he'll pull the incoming troop onto your King Tower, which will not only activate it, but also cause the troop in question to take fire from all 3 towers at once, killing it quickly. You can mess around with the timing of the Fisherman placement depending on what card you're facing, but the Fisherman makes King Tower activation easy and fun. Just make sure you aren't on the other end of this interaction and don't let your Firecrackers and E-Spirits go out alone. Going with the theme of cards that pull other cards, the next mistake is not using the Tornado. Now I will admit, not every single deck in the game works well with a Tornado in it, but I would argue that most deck archetypes could benefit from having the Tornado included if you can make it work. The Tornado is one of the most versatile cards in the game, since not only can it help get King Tower activations, but it can be a huge huge help with getting a lot of value for your splash cards like the Wizard, Executioner, Bomber, or even Valkyrie. Not only that, but the Tornado can also line up shots for your Magic Archer or Firecracker to get a ton of damage on the tower. The Tornado can honestly be used in a million different ways, so if you haven't already given it a try, I would highly recommend it, especially if you have splash cards in your deck already. Next, we have ignoring split wall breakers. Whenever you play a game against a player who's using wall breakers, you'll usually see them split the wall breakers at some point. The reason they do this is so that you'll feel that it isn't worth it to defend them, and they hope you'll ignore them and let them keep chipping away at your tower. This chip damage can really add up though over the course of a match, so it's worth it to learn a few easy ways to counter the wall breakers when they're split. The best way in my opinion is to either play skeletons, archers, a musketeer, or even a building in the middle of your side of the arena so that the wall breakers get taken out before reaching your towers. This works well with some of the other tips on our list, since if you split archers to take out the wall breakers, you now have a free counter push that your opponent will have to defend too. Next, we have not using the deck explorer feature. If you're anything like me, you have a few favorite cards in the game that you like using whenever you can. For me, I love using the evolved knight and the evolved archers together. Sometimes it can be hard to make a deck from scratch though, so Supercell made a feature where you can add a couple of cards or even half a deck worth of cards and use the explorer feature to show popular decks that include those cards. That way, if you don't want to play the same old boring meta deck from top ladder that you always play, you can use your favorite cards in a more sensible deck without having to create the deck yourself and figure out which cards work well together. So if you haven't given this feature a try, I'd say it's definitely worth trying out. Next, we have not using some type of bait. We've all heard of the classic log bait in Clash Royale, and most of us hate it. The reason why log bait is so hated is because the log bait player will purposely play a bunch of cards like the Princess and Goblin Gang to draw out your log, and then you won't have it when they use their Goblin Barrel, leading to a frustrating situation for you. Log bait doesn't have to be the only deck that does this though, as pretty much every spell in the game has multiple cards that it counters very well. So if you find yourself having trouble with a specific spell, for example Fireball with your deck, I'd recommend putting another card or two like the Flying Machine, Zappies, or Royal Hogs into the deck to trick your opponent into using their Fireball, allowing you to get a ton of value with your main card. Next, we have not keeping track of your opponent's elixir. Now don't get me wrong, you don't need to be a tryhard and physically keep a count in your head of the exact amount of elixir your opponent has at any given time, but it is smart to think about it in certain scenarios and use it to your advantage. For example, if your opponent plays a golem in the back of the arena, you know they're sitting on 2 elixir at most. If you also have a lot of elixir at that point, it'd be smart to push with a high pressure card like a Hog Rider or Elite Barbs in the opposite lane. Since you know they're low on elixir, they won't be able to support their push and also counter your push on the other side, so they'll end up having to choose one or the other, leading to you either getting a ton of damage with your push and maybe trading towers, or better yet, them abandoning their heavy push altogether to defend yours, leaving you with an easy cleanup on the other lane. The next tip is to not ignore the death damage from the skeleton barrel. Every time you see a skeleton barrel floating towards your tower, it's tempting to just wait for it to go down and then time your log or barbarian barrel so it takes the skeletons out without them doing any damage. While this may seem like a good option, the skeleton barrel deals nearly 200 death damage at max level, so that damage can add up very quickly. A better way to deal with the skeleton barrel is to either distract it with another building like a Tesla, or to use a musketeer, archers, or similar to take it out before it's too close to your tower. Then if you still want to log the skeletons, you can do that and still have a good counter push while not taking any tower damage. The next mistake is playing your lightning or fireball too early. Most people think you should play a lightning or fireball as soon as your opponent gives you value by placing something like a musketeer in the back. While this is true, it's a lot better to wait until the troop is almost out of range of the spot where you can hit the tower and the troop with the same spell, because a lot of times your opponent will end up placing another troop like a wizard, Sparky, or anything really in that same radius, allowing you to get even more value for simply being a bit patient. This is especially satisfying with the lightning spell, as I can't tell you how many times I've waited until the last second to play my lightning and ended up catching an extra musketeer or wizard, in many cases winning me the whole match. The next mistake on our list is using Royal Giant without the Fisherman. The Royal Giant and the Fisherman are like bread and butter, they just go together so well. And there's a good reason for this. We talked a little bit about the Fisherman before, and while he can be powerful in many different decks, he is the strongest when used with the Royal Giant. Since the Royal Giant is very susceptible to being taken out by tank killers like the P.E.K.K.A. and Mini P.E.K.K.A., the Fisherman is very useful for grabbing those troops and pulling them away from the Royal Giant. You don't have a lot of time to do this before the Royal Giant dies, so you want to pay attention to your opponent's timing and try to predict their counter with your Fisherman. Just one good play like this could win you the entire match, since the Royal Giant does so much damage. That being said, take your own advice and switch up your timing and placement of the Fisherman as well, so that your opponent can't easily predict it and take it out. In honor of the new Goblin Drill evolution, the first mistake you might be making is playing your Goblin Barrel or Goblin Drill in the same spot every time. If your opponent is even a little bit serious about winning, they'll likely notice you placing your Goblin Barrel right in the center of the Princess Tower every single time, and they'll be able to take it out with their log, barb barrel, arrows, or whatever else they have with no problem at all. Instead, you'll want to switch up your placements by putting the drill or barrel on different sides of the tower, or even further behind the tower, to try and catch your opponent off guard and actually get some damage in with your win condition. So if you aren't already doing this, go ahead and give it a try next time you use a Goblin Barrel. This next mistake is way too common, and I'm even guilty of doing this myself sometimes. This mistake is rushing out to buy the Diamond Pass every season when the new evolution comes out. I know it seems tempting to play the the newest card in the game, especially since most of them are a bit OP upon release, but you might want to save your money for future evolutions or other offers since most of these evolutions end up getting nerfed within a few weeks anyway. On top of that, Supercell has recently been starting to give away some of the older card evolutions for free through special events and things like that, so if you're just a little patient, you could end up getting to play the evolution anyway. So next time you feel those $12 burning a hole in your pocket at the beginning of the month, maybe think twice about splurging and buying the Diamond Pass. This next one's for you Expo and Mortar players out there. It's very common to see players playing their Expo or Mortar in the center of the arena on their side of the river, but this is usually not a good idea. Most of the time when you do this, you're just giving your opponent even more space to play cards in where they can tank for your Mortar or Expo. Instead of playing your Siege card in the middle, try playing it to one side or the other, one tile back from the river to give yourself some breathing room to defend your Siege card and hopefully prevent the opponent from defending it. One exception to this rule is if your opponent is playing some type of tank card like a Giant or Golem, it can sometimes make sense to go ahead and place your Mortar in the middle to pull the tank and also get a shot or two on the opponent's tower at the same time. Keep in mind though, this only applies to the Mortar since it has a dead zone, so don't go trying this with your Expo. This next mistake is simply playing Mega Knight. I know it may seem tempting and all your friends might be frothing at the mouth saying it's the way to go, but just trust me, it's not as good as you think it is. The next mistake is not pairing your deck to the tower troop you're using. I've personally won more games than I can count just because my opponent decided to use the Cannoneer as their tower troop, but also decided to not include any splash cards of any kind in their deck. The Cannoneer's main weakness is swarms like the Skeleton Army, so if you decide to use that tower troop, you really want to bring a Valkyrie, Bomber, or some other splash card to go ahead and defend against the swarms. This tip honestly mostly applies to the Cannoneer since the Dagger Duchess and Princess Tower both do good against swarms and tanks in my opinion, but it's still a good idea to think about your tower troop choice when building the rest of the deck. The next mistake I see people make all the time is using a Book of Books on a card that isn't a champion or at least a legendary. While the Book of Books does work for any rarity, it is much easier to max out a common card than it is to max out a legendary or a champion, so no matter how tempting it may be sometimes, don't waste your books on commons and rare cards. Just keep requesting and opening chests and you'll max out those cards in no time. Next we have making a purchase in any Supercell game without entering a creator code first. I myself don't have a creator code of my own yet, at least not as of recording this video. I will go ahead and plug it in the description when I do, but any of you watching this are bound to know of another Supercell content creator whose code you could enter. Entering a code before a purchase is free to you, but it does allow the creator whose code you enter to get a very small percentage of the revenue for that purchase. So next time you're going to buy the Clash Royale, a shop offer, or anything in between, make sure and take the extra 5 seconds to enter a creator code and show some love to your favorite creator. Many people's first instinct when they see a bandit coming towards their tower is to surround it with skeletons right when it crosses the bridge, since this can be a viable strategy to counter many different cards in the game. You don't actually want to do this with the bandit though, as she will take out the skeletons quickly and then still end up dashing on your tower, doing a lot of damage in the process. Instead, try placing your skeletons right in front of your princess tower so that the bandit wastes the dash on one of the skeletons and then ends up too close to your tower to dash onto it after cleaning up the Larrys. Trust me on this one, you'll thank me later. The next mistake a lot of players make is placing their freeze spell too early. Especially when pairing the freeze with a popular win condition like the balloon or graveyard, people often like to place the freeze spell almost immediately as their win condition is close to the tower or on the tower. Well, you might be surprised to know that this isn't actually the best way to do it. Usually it's actually better to hover over the tower and surrounding area with your freeze spell, since 9 times out of 10 your opponent will end up playing something to counter your balloon or graveyard, at which point you can place the freeze in a spot that freezes both the tower and the defensive card, allowing you to do much more damage and potentially even take the tower. Next we have ignoring the knockback on the Fireball and Giant Snowball. The Fireball and Giant Snowball are two strong spells in the game that can provide a lot of value if played in the right scenario. But did you know that a ton of players actually miss out on some extra value here by ignoring the knockback on these cards? A very common example I see all the time is when people have a balloon coming in towards their tower, they tend to Fireball directly on top of the balloon, or even worse, right behind the balloon. Hitting the balloon head on will do almost nothing in terms of knockback, but hitting it from behind will actually knock the balloon closer to your tower. What you want to do instead is place the Fireball so that it hits the front of the balloon or even the corner of the balloon so that it pushes it backwards and potentially towards the center if you're trying to pull the balloon last minute with a building. The same concept applies to other troops as well, whether you're using the Fireball or the Snowball. Just make sure you memorize which troops actually take knockback from those cards. Speaking of pulling troops to the middle using buildings, another mistake I've seen more often than you'd think is when players try to use a hidden Tesla to counter an incoming Royal Ghost. Now don't get me wrong, this can be done, but you can't just go about it all willy-nilly. If you want to use the Tesla to defend a Royal Ghost, you should place the Tesla very close to the Royal Ghost instead of in the center. This is because the Tesla starts in an upright position when it's placed, so the Ghost will actually be able to hit the Tesla once before it can go underground, therefore revealing itself and continuing to attack the Tesla. If you place the Tesla in the middle though, the Ghost will simply ignore it and go straight for your Princess Tower. Next we have buying the global tournament reward chest for 500 gems when you got less than 10 wins. If you really stop to look at the paid rewards for performing well in the global tournaments, the rewards for 9 wins or less are sort of underwhelming, at least for 500 gems. When you reach 10 wins, however, you unlock the legendary King's chest as a reward, which usually costs 2,500 gems in the shop or the equivalent of $25 to buy it on its own. This means that when you buy the rewards with 10 wins or more, you end up getting that chest for 1/5 of the price, 500 gems in comparison to 2,500, and all of the other rewards are just icing on the cake. For this reason, I wouldn't recommend buying the rewards from the global tournament if you got less than 10 wins, since it just isn't worth the gems. Card masteries are a mechanic in the game that is often overlooked by many players. This is unfortunate though, since masteries can be pretty easy to complete with a few simple strategies and can provide hundreds of gems, thousands of gold, and even a good amount of the card itself or wild cards of the same rarity. If you want to get your masteries done a bit more quickly, I would recommend looking out for any challenges on the far right tab in the game that have more elixir in them, such as double, triple, or even infinite elixir challenges. These challenges do count towards masteries, and you can simply spam all the cards that you want to work towards masteries for down on the map and make a ton of progress towards these masteries and, more importantly, the rewards they unlock. The next mistake is making your deck too expensive, and let me explain why. Having an expensive deck hasn't necessarily always been a bad thing in Clash Royale, but ever since the introduction of evolutions to the game, you want to make sure you're keeping your deck cheap by switching in more low-cost alternatives into your deck. This is because you need a faster cycle to get back to your evolutions more often during matches, increasing the chance that you'll win games. Now, I'm not saying to go ahead and delete your deck and just use all spirits so that your deck is ultra cheap, but maybe just switch out a couple of cards in your favorite decks for cheaper alternatives to help speed up that cycle. This next mistake has probably lost you a lot of time over the years. As obvious as it sounds, many players don't know that you can actually hold down on that donate button in your clan's chat to donate as many troops as you're allowed to a given player. This is much quicker than just tapping on the button over and over, and Supercell even allows you to use multiple fingers, so you can hold down one finger on each donation button on your screen to nearly instantly fill up all the requests at once. Using this tip is a great way to save a little bit of time and help out your clanmates even more efficiently. The next mistake is not using the edge of the tornado's radius when using the card. For those who don't know, the tornado pulls harder and faster on cards that are further from its center when the spell goes off. This is why people are able to time their tornado perfectly to drag a hog rider all the way from the edge of the princess tower to their king tower. Obviously, the center of the tornado is where the cards end up being pulled towards, but next time you're using a tornado, be sure to place it just right so that the hog rider or whatever else is coming your way ends up getting pulled as far away as possible. This next tip is probably one of the biggest on this list, which is to not ignore the card demonstration videos that play when you click on a card in the deck builder. These little videos will indicate good and bad strategies or strengths and weaknesses of a given card, denoting each by either a thumbs up emote for when the card is good to be used or a crying emote for situations in which the card struggles. This feature is especially useful for new card evolutions that get added to the game, since they get their own video and show you how to use and how not to use the new evolutions. The first mistake I've seen way too many times is when players place their Valkyrie right in the middle of a group of barbarians. While this may seem like a good play at first, it's actually better to just place the Valkyrie a bit to the side so that it can be ready to swing before coming into contact with the barbarians. If you place it in the middle of them, the Valkyrie will end up taking some damage before she's even ready, and she'll actually end up going down before all the barbarians are dead, whereas placing it to the side allows the Valkyrie to kill all the barbarians and still have a bit of health to spare. Then you could even place a giant or something like that in front of it to go ahead and get a counter push going. So next time you're using the Valkyrie, keep this tip in mind. The next mistake is ignoring the Golden Knight. For whatever reason, a lot of people online seem to not like the Golden Knight very much, but I think he's a very underrated champion that can get so much value, especially when used alongside the Tornado. For those who don't know, the Golden Knight will stop his chain dash after coming into contact with an arena tower. Because of this, we can abuse the Tornado by pulling everything close to the tower and activating the Golden Knight ability at the same time. As you can see, the Golden Knight will dash onto everything and end up connecting to the tower as well. This can be even stronger when combined with a bigger push, so I would definitely recommend giving this combo a try, as at the very least I can guarantee you'll have fun with it. Next, we have using the Elixir Golem. The Elixir Golem is pretty much only used in that annoying battle healer deck that we all face from time to time. When you do face it and inevitably get 3-starred by this deck in 30 seconds at one point or another, it can be tempting to try out the deck for yourself, but trust me, you won't get the same results. Now, before you all go and comment skill issue, this deck can be good in some situations, but that's the problem, is that the deck is way too situational. What that means is that it's very hit or miss, and you'll pretty much either get a crazy 3-star win or you'll get absolutely destroyed, and unfortunately I find that you'll get absolutely destroyed more often, as most players know how to deal with this deck pretty well. Not only that, but Elixir Golem players don't have the best track record as far as win rate goes nowadays, so while you might get lucky from time to time and crush someone, your other games will be awful. Next, we have not lining up your Magic Archer shots. As we all know, the Magic Archer's arrow will pierce infinitely until it ultimately dissipates at a set range from the archer. archer. Because of this, it's a good idea to use your magic archer whenever something is coming towards the bridge on the opponent's side. By the time that troop gets to your magic archer, you will likely get 3 or 4 shots in on the opponent's tower depending on the speed of the troop in question, while damaging the troop as well. The magic archer does more damage than you think, so if you're able to pull this off multiple times throughout the match, you can completely take out a tower with just this chip damage alone. As with many other strategies, pairing him with the tornado will make this even easier, so if you haven't given the magic archer a try yet, go ahead and throw him in your deck and try this out the next time you play. The next mistake is not joining the channel. Yes, that's right, I just launched 3 tiers of channel memberships for any of you who want to support what I do here on the channel. If you click the join button below this video next to the subscribe button, it will bring up an explanation video that will talk more about the exclusive perks that you can unlock for as little as $2.99 a month. That money goes to support the channel and help me release videos like this more often. Please consider at least taking a look at these to see what's available, as you can always cancel later if you don't find it to be worth it. The next mistake I see all the time is people wasting the champion abilities. For those of you who don't know, if you use a champion's ability and the champion dies before the ability actually activates, since there's a slight delay, the game will sometimes not refund your elixir spent on the ability. This is super annoying since the game is pretty much just taking away your elixir, so to counteract this, you should pay close attention to your champion's health before using any abilities. It's worth noting that the little prince's ability seems to pretty much always give you a refund, but maybe that's just since it costs 3 elixir, which is the most expensive price for an ability in the entire game. Either way, pay attention to that health bar before you click on the ability next time. The next mistake is dismissing the lumberjack. The lumberjack has always been a strong card as it has comparable health and DPS to a mini P.E.K.K.A, but runs faster and drops a rage spell upon death. A couple years back though, Supercell made this card go from good to amazing when they added damage to the rage spell, which in turn affected the lumberjack's rage as well. The lumberjack is now one of the most versatile cards in the game since it can kill tanks like the giant and then turn around and demolish a skeleton army with its death rage spell. It's worth mentioning that the rage spell also damages air cards, so the lumberjack can easily take out a swarm of bats or low health minions in your push, saving you an extra spell and allowing you to get tons of damage in many situations. The next mistake is using the elixir collector. The elixir collector has had its ups and downs over the years since it was first released alongside the game 8 years ago. That being said, whenever the card is strong, it seems to be too strong and everyone uses it, which inevitably leads to it getting nerfed again. This has happened multiple times now, including semi-recently when everyone started using the elixir collector again earlier this year, but it then got nerfed like it always does, and now I really just wouldn't recommend using it. Instead, I'd recommend just putting 1 or 2 cards in your deck that only cost 1 or 2 elixir so that you can cycle quickly and get a leg up against your opponent. Next, we have dismissing the Electro Dragon. Now I included this one because I myself have slept on this card over the years until just recently. The Electro Dragon can pair excellently with the Tornado to chain onto the opponent's tower, or chain onto an Inferno Tower, Inferno Dragon, or Sparky to reset it and support your push. Not only that, but the Electro Dragon was just announced to be getting an evolution in the next season in only a couple of days, and the evolution is one of the most broken we've seen yet. For those who don't know, the evolved Electro Dragon will chain infinitely instead of to only 3 targets, allowing you to completely delete skeleton armies or just form long chains across the entire arena. This also fixes that frustrating issue where your opponent can play skeletons or minions since they can protect their Inferno or Sparky from the Electro Dragon, since the evolved Electro Dragon will chain onto it anyway. So especially now, I would recommend keeping an open mind and maybe giving the Electro Dragon a try. The next mistake is using the Furnace. The Furnace used to be a fairly versatile card before the Fire Spirit rework that was done a few years back. For those who are newer to the game, the Fire Spirit used to contain 3 weaker Fire Spirits for 1 elixir instead of the 1 spirit we have today. As a result, the Furnace would also spawn Fire Spirits in waves of 3, which was devastating to the opponent's tower if left unanswered, and also difficult to defend as easily. Nowadays, if you time it right, you can actually cancel out 3 entire waves from the Furnace with a simple Ice or Electro Spirit. As you can see on screen now, to do this, you want to have your Spirit tank the first wave and then jump onto the Furnace and the second Fire Spirit. This ends up denying the 3rd wave as well by damaging the Furnace and causing it to go down faster. This is just one good example, but the point stands, the Furnace isn't very good since the change. Next, we have sleeping on the Tombstone. Now, I will admit, this tip is slightly influenced by nostalgia because I've always loved using the Tombstone since day one, since it's a hard counter to cards like the Prince, but it's also versatile enough to effectively defend a giant, hog rider, or similar with the possible help of a cheap spell. The Tombstone is a card that has gone through a couple of balance changes of its own over the years, but the way it currently stands, the Tombstone will spawn multiple skeletons per wave instead of just 1 like it used to, allowing it to perform even better than it did before. This building is one that doesn't get the attention it deserves in my opinion, so definitely give it a fair try if you haven't messed around with it in a while. The next mistake is only using the Miner as a tank. While the Miner can be a good option to tank for a goblin army or similar, many people don't realize that the Miner is actually a really good support card for your win condition as well. For For example, many Lava Hound players will wait until a musketeer, wizard, or whatever the opponent is using to counter their hound locks onto the hound, and then they'll use their miner to actually zip right to that troop and take it out. Then the miner can move to the tower and do some damage, and then tank for the lava pups when the hound bursts. This is probably the best use case for the miner since it is used as both a damage dealer and a tank to its full potential, but the same principle can be applied to other tanks and win conditions as well, so try to think outside the box more next time you use the miner. And if you enjoyed that video, subscribe to the channel and click that join button to become a member today.